Hello everyone. We are glad to announce the release of new ignition module RWS, which stands for Restful Web Services. This is built on WebDev module, and it's an integral part of the AR SCADA module. In fact, AR SCADA internally uses the same module to communicate with ignition. So using this module, you can develop this sort of interactive HTML pages using the open source components which are freely available nowadays. These are the chart.js components. This is a circular slider component. This is an HTML page, and as you know, there are a lot of freeware software available like jQuery and chart.js and SVG. Using this, you can develop highly interactive HTML pages which can communicate with ignition using this module. So there's a two-way communication possible. For example, if I click this, it'll change some of the parameters on the ignition. If I set to some other value, this button changes these tags to toggles between 50 and 55, 60 and 65. So as you can see, there's a two-way communication possible. The refresh cycle is 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds the screen is updating, fetching data from ignition. So basically this is an integral part of the AR SCADA module, and it has to be downloaded as AR SCADA project as explained in other tutorials, but I would like to give you a brief step-by-step process. First of all, download this AR SCADA from here and unzip the file. It'll create a file, AR SCADA master folder. From there you have to copy the AR SCADA ARS folder. So this is the master file that you will get when you download, and it will contain a subfolder called ARS, which you have to copy and paste it to the default location where it is expected, which is C:. So under C:, you copy this, and then this is the AR SCADA files, and in addition it generates the new version creates the RWS folder which contains this new RWS module. So the other steps are explained here. So basically there are two sample projects. One is for the ignition 7.9 and other is for ignition 8. So which are kept in this folder, docs folder. This is for ignition 7.9, this is for ignition 8. So basically you have to, in ignition designer, you have to create a new project and give it by default a name called ARS, or you can name it anything else, but for this it is pre-configured for ARS, because you have to change the name of enter the name of the project in one or two places in the config file. So to start with, just create an empty project called ARS, and if the ARS project already exists from your previous installation, then you can import this project into the ARS newly created or existing project, so that the new scripting libraries from the WebDev module are copied. And this folder also contains tags.xml file. So you have to also create or copy the in the default location, you have to right click and copy the import CSV XML file from the other location. Okay. So the other steps are, uh, once you import tags, um, then you have to ensure that your project name, your server name is properly given. So you have, for that you have to ensure that uh, in the viewer folder there is a file called embed host. This file should contain the host name. Your host name will be different than what is given here. This is my host name, and there's a project name. We have given created a project with ARS name. If you have created something else, you have to enter that here. And this is the default tags file, which is basically a file that defines the database. This is a JSON file which defines the tags that your project will use from Ignition. So you have to give the parameters of the JSON. One is the tag name, what is the tag type, which is a float or a int, then the definition and the units of the tags, and the field width. It will occupy the display and number of decimal places, and what are the alarm limits. This is another. So all this is explained in detail in the ARS tutorials, and the same file is used by the RWS module. So now these are the steps which are common between the RWS and the AR-SCADA module. So you have to also ensure that WebDev module is installed, and then you have to just enter the name to visualize the AR-SCADA project, AR-SCADA. So basically for my configuration, if I open this here, so this is the main menu of AR-SCADA. It's displaying, and then if I enter the sample project, so this is how the AR-SCADA project is invoked. So this is all explained in the tutorial for AR-SCADA, but why I'm explaining is here is that the steps up to this point are the same. Now we look at what are the steps to be followed for the RWS module. So you have to follow up to this step 7, and after this you have to enter the folder called RWS. So this contains the embed host, which is again a configuration file. Basically it is same as this, but at a different location. It's in the RWS folder. So again you have to give the host name, the project name is also same, port number is also same, and this is the default tags file. So what it means is that the database for each of this HTML page can be different. So if you don't specify the database in the HTML file, then this folder database will be used. And there's one extra parameter here compared to AR-SCADA is the cycle time, because this RWS module runs in a cyclic loop to fetch the data using AJAX calls and refreshes the database on your local HTML page. So it's a single page application. So once it set up the database, and then the dynamic data only is fetched to optimize the communication. Only the tag values and tag state are the only parameters that are fetched periodically. The metadata like definition and units is fetched only once at the beginning when you load the page. So that's about the configuration, and after that once this configuration is done, okay, we'll see other files. Uh, then rws.html and rws1.html. These are the two pre-configured files for the demo, which show you how the RWS module works. So to invoke this is the file URL you have to give. This is the host name, and this is the project name. If you have given some other project, you have to enter it here, and then after importing the project into Ignition, you remember you have to save. Suppose this URL doesn't work in spite of your importing, you might not have saved the project, so you have to save. Don't forget that. And then RWS1 is one of the two files, and we'll see how the configuration looks like. This is basically some JavaScript simple code which uses the CDN at the beginning, at the top, and then there's a small code which binds the tags with the component. And then there's another very simple without any extra component. This is simple, just using the HTML. Some couple of tags have been shown here, and here we can it just this button writes the value to 65, and this button writes here 55, and this button will refresh both the values to 50. I think you need to refresh this. Yeah. Now if I click on this changes to 55, and this will change to. So this is another HTML page which is very simple, and we will use this to explain how the binding is to be done, and how the components have to. This is a very simple, least amount of code is there in this file, so we'll use this in the example. So these are the files, and then tags.txt is again, this file is copied onto this is the file, and you can have, if suppose if you are 10 HTML pages and each one uses a different subset of database, then you can have 10 different files here with different names, and their names have to be configured in the HTML page, rws.html, and there we'll just see the code. So let's open the simpler one. This is the rws.html. So here you have to basically copy the same file, and it has got it inserts source file embed host, which is the configuration for the server, and rws.js, this is a simple JavaScript file which basically does the communication with the web dev module in a loop. And then this is the HTML code which defines the 3 buttons that we saw. Set the value to 55. These 2 buttons set different tags to. Now basically on click it calls a write tags function, and this is a function which is included in the RWS, and you have to give the series of tags as a string separated by semicolon that you want to write to, and what are the different values. If you have multiple tags, you have to give them in this string separated by a semicolon, and the corresponding values have to be given here. So you have to give the values correctly, because there is not much of validation code, the data validation being done by this small module, because we expect the users to be knowledgeable. in JavaScript and Ignition. Now there's another button which writes on to tag 1, and this is the one which writes on both the tags. So this is two tags are listed separated by a semicolon or the corresponding values. And if you click the button, this command will go to the WebDev module and write onto the tags the appropriate values. And then there are two paragraphs defined, demo and demo 1. We are basically trying to see the simpler code. And here, this is where you have to define which tags file you're going to use. If you miss out this, if you don't specify this file here, it will take the default tag file that is defined in the folder, in the RWS folder. This tags file it will take. But if you specify a different file name, then that file will be bound to this HTML page. So this is how we can bind different text files or different databases or subset of Ignition database with the different HTML pages. Now here is the code. You have to there's a main function which is called by the RWS module. After it finishes the initial handshake with the Ignition server, and you have to put your code in this block. So basically we have defined some say 8-10 variables, tags from Ignition that will be fetching for our display purposes. So this is where we have defined. You can use whatever JavaScript syntax you want, but we have defined it as an array, as a string, and then which we split into an array. Basically table was becomes an array, and it has got so many number of tags in row, and then to search a tag which is in the database, you have to call this function search tag and specify the tag name, and it will return the index. Basically this ARS module, it fetches from Ignition an array of it creates an array of JSON objects corresponding to each of the tags that you have defined. So the kind of data it fetches from Ignition is the for example, what is the value, current value, and what is the state. It can be in state 0, 1, 2 up to 9, 10 states. Just a number comes, and that number, what condition it represents, is given in the metadata of that tag. So these two are the dynamic values, and the condition is an array which specifies how many states you have and what are the different conditions for each state. Something is greater than, something less than, and what are the limits. It is another array. This is all explained in the other tutorial, AR Scalar tutorial, but it's just revision. And what is the label for each condition. So this is also, these three are an array of dimension 10 for each state, what is the condition, what is the corresponding limit, and what is the display. It's in high or very low, whatever label you want to give. And what's the type of this tag? It's a float or integer or a boolean. And what's the definition, and its units, and the field width, and the number of decimal points. So this is the metadata and the real-time data that is stored in this JavaScript file, in this page. So that becomes your sort of your database, and then you have to program your HTML page using this in terms. So the DB object dot tag DB dot index is the array. This is how you have to get the index, calling this function search tag, and use that index to fetch whatever value, appropriate value of that tag you want. So value and state will be the dynamic values of the properties of the tag, as this RWS module will update periodically. And then you have to fetch and use it for whatever purpose you want. Now then you have to create a loop using the cycle time variable, which is defined in the config file. So this set interval, it will call this loop function. So this is how you have to structure your code. And one first call to loop is being called before this, so that the first cycle is not delayed. Otherwise, if you set the 5-second cycle time, so first execution of loop will happen only after 5 seconds, which may be quite slow. So after moment the main function is called, you can simply call the first execution of the loop so that your screen is refreshed, and then you have to, it will periodically call the loop, and this is where you have to update your dynamic values. So the update loop basically is a function. Here what we are doing is that we are writing the tag 0. So this is where we are the 0th element of the database and its value property, and this is the first value. Actually there is a mistake here, it should be 1, tag 1. So this is how the simple code which you see here, this is how the code works. Now if you look at the bigger, more complex code, which is RWS 1, now this uses the CDNs for the jQuery and the round slider and circular slider and things like that, and it uses some dynamic panels for responsive websites, so that if you scale the screen, the screen will adjust itself in vertical horizontal direction. So you have to basically use all your HTML skills to design the look and feel of the HTML page, and using the open source libraries, you can build amazing things on the HTML page. So basically, yeah, here again we have called the embed host and embed RWS, and again the same two buttons have been defined here, but here we are writing on multiple tags. At a stretch we are writing about 5-6 tags. When you press set value, it will set everything to 50, 60, 70, etc., these tags, and the other button will change to something else, so that we see a dynamic effect. So there are then the 3 panels are defined for the slider component. So slider is a standard component, is included in the CDN, and then you can do a Google search to find out how to use these components. And there is a table component defined, which has got some 5 values will be updated. So you can use a lot of other jQuery tables and Excel tables and whatever is available. And then the chart components have been defined. So these are canvas components, and now from here the simple code what you saw here, it is basically structure is the same. So you have the tag database file defined if it's other than the default one, and again the 10 this 0 to 7 tags we have defined, and this is the main program which will be called by the ARS RWS module when it finishes loading the database from Ignition. And here again we are splitting the table into array, and it's finding out how many entries are there in that, and yeah, that is just doing a search if some table, by if you have given a wrong uh, name here, it will point out some error. uh, okay, assuming there are no errors in the tag definition, we'll proceed further. So this is a jQuery component slider 1 and slider 2, which has got a different configuration. This is a different type of slider. The slider has got configuration parameters, what style is with range, with minimum and range and things like that. This is a default slider. So this is called before the update table or before the loop, so that this is not repeated. This is not, it's an input component, not an output. Only output needs to be repeated in a loop. So update table and then call a loop once. Okay, actually this is not required, this is redundant because we already have update table here. Anyway, we are debugging on the fly, doesn't matter. So then this loop is configured, which will call cycle time value is 5 in the data in the config file, so it is 5000 milliseconds. It will call the loop, and here we've got the update table, update chart, update line. So update table is basically writing on the p tags uh, the values. This is a tag name and the corresponding definition. The tag object tag db is the array, the JSON array. We are displaying different elements of that array. So definition, what's the current value, what are the units, and things like that. And draw table is basically I think draw table is not called. There was some issue because this is an Excel component. There it needs to be resolved. So the component keeps growing. So we have to. I still have to figure out how to update only the dynamic value. But this is how this, just to show the concept. So this is the draw table, and which has been copied from the sample code has been copied from the chart.js. And by default it had these values, which I have changed to now the dynamic values. So every cycle it will refresh the chart with new values from Ignition. These are being read by the RWS model from Ignition, and these are available here. The latest values are available for the different. So this is all how the whole thing is configured, and you can see the response of that in this page. Yeah. So yeah, you can, in fact, you can change something in Ignition. Let's say tag 0. I can change it to 35. It should reflect in this component. I'm sorry, I think we have to refresh this page. Yeah, it has become 35 now. Sometimes this refresh stops and you have to refresh the page. But hopefully it's not some major issue. That's something to do with the web dev module. So I think that's all about this new module. I hope you can find good uses of it. You can, once you have the interactivity with the HTML with the Ignition available in an HTML page, so sky is the limit for what you can build. There are lots and lots of open source component freely available for you to be used, and even SVG is there. Using that you can build lots of graphics and things like some P&I diagrams and things like that. So please, will request you to please download the AR SCADA module completely and evaluate the AR SCADA as well, and use this, try this RWS component as well. And if your the licensing terms are same for AR SCADA and RWS, and we request you to please evaluate, try it with your customer projects, and give us an opportunity, give us some encouragement. Please purchase some licenses so that we are motivated and we can survive. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time.